ham radio. Welcome back, everybody. It's Freddie Mac, your ham radio crusader, and I'm here to tell you today about repeaters. Not that you don't know everything there is to know about repeaters. I'm just kind of giving you a heads up about what I've been doing lately. I got into this GMRSlive thing and GMRS repeaters, and some friends of mine who are non-hams got their GMRS license, and we're working on building a small GMRS network in our county. And when I discovered GMRSlive, it's so much like, it's based off HamVoIP software. It's so much like AllStar that it made it very easy to build some GMRS repeaters and connect them through the GMRSlive network as you would in the AllStar network. So I wanted to create this video as a basic introduction to the radios that I've been using. I had a friend of mine, N5DRW, Steve Lennett, up in Mounds, Oklahoma. He's been mentoring me on the Icom commercial radios for quite some time, and I thought, you know what? This is knowledge that needs to be shared with everyone. Not that he didn't, it's just that it's not his thing, you know? And I'm like, well, I've got a nice portal to the internet and the rest of the world to share this knowledge so a lot of other folks can take advantage of it as well. So let me introduce you to the Icom Commercial Mobile. This model in particular is the ICF221S. How well you can see that because I'm blind as a bat. But this is the ICF221S, and there are many models that will work. Like this one is the ICF6011, the 6011. It has a simple display. It's a 4-channel model, and I think you can actually make it do 8 channels, but for a repeater, you just need 1 per radio. That's all you need. And this is an S model. So an S model usually indicates that it is also a simple radio. It's 4-channel mobile. There are other models. For example, this is the ICF221-1. That -1 at the end usually indicates a specific bandwidth. But it also indicates that this model has an LCD display and the alphanumeric characters that display upon the screen when you program it. Pretty much anything you want to put there, but there's only so many digits. These radios usually have a simple volume knob on the front, up and down arrows, different channels. These buttons are all programmable for different functions. A nice heat sink on the radio, a PL259 connector in the back, and a speaker jack. Now you notice there's a power cable with a standard T connector. And you notice there's a chunk missing out of the back here, right? Well, when it comes from a factory, that is usually closed up, but I'm getting to that part as to why it's not there now. Icom designed these radios in such a way that it made them very easy to become repeaters. Very easy is kind of a general term. We'll just say fairly easy. There's some proprietary there's some semi-proprietary or not so common parts that you've got to buy, but you can still get to connect the radio. So let's open this one up. I only put in 1 screw so it'd be easier to take apart for the video. You notice I've got the words TX marked here. I do that so that I know which one's the transmit radio and which one's the receive radio, because you've got to have 1 for each for a full duplex repeater. But if you notice, this little connector right here should be 11 pins. Yeah, this particular model has an 11-pin connector. I like to call this the accessory connector, but it's an accessory cable connector in all reality. But this model has an 11-pin. The 6011 model has a 13-pin. But if you have a cable with an 11-pin connector, it'll fit right on those first 11 pins very easily. This is called the J6 connector per the service manual. You can either buy the proper cable accessory cable that Icom manufactures, but I believe it's out of manufacture. There are still some new old stock floating around on the internet, but you will pay dearly for them. They're anywhere from $40 to $60. I've seen them over $100. So a lot of folks are just building their own, and it's relatively not that hard. On the Ham Radio Crusader website, hamradiolife.org, you can find the schematics for the different model cables. So this is another IC F221S, and it has its accessory connector already built and installed. How well you can see that. Okay, now this radio has already got its cable built and installed. Now I know this looks a little rough, but I have to build it in such a way where it will fit and not get too much stress on this particular area right here. This 11-pin connector right here I purchased from DigiKey, and the pins, that crimp pins that go inside it, are very tiny. And I discovered right away I could not crimp those pins myself. My crimper was destroying them. So I talked to one of their technicians, and they advised me of a jumper that they build. He advised me of a jumper that they build with the pins already connected onto them. And I'll include these part numbers in the description of this video. And as you can see, these pins are very, very small, but they're crimped on already onto a 26 gauge wire, I believe. I can't tell by this part number, but it's pre-crimped on, and I thought this is super convenient for building the cables. That makes it a little bit easier to see. And I got a surprise when they came in, because the pin was crimped onto both ends of the connector. So that allowed me, and it's 6-inch, or the pins were crimped onto both ends of the wire. So that allowed me to say, hey, I can get a double use out of these. I can just clip it halfway through, because this is a 6-inch wire, and that affords me more pins to build cables with. And this one's pretty rudimentary. This is one of the first ones, if not the first one, that I built. And it looks a little, yeah, I was trying to get into a rhythm here. Heat shrink is your friend. But what I did was I would take that 6-inch wire and strip about a 1/4 inch off of it, and I got some of this shielded cabling from DigiKey as well. It's 6 conductor, and I would strip it back and put the wires together and solder them, and then cover them up with heat shrink to give them a little bit of strength, tensile strength, so that they can go under a little bit of stress. This cable that I have here is a direct connection cable, so you plug one into each radio and there is no need for a controller. You can actually set hang time timing in the software programming of the radio, but it doesn't ID itself, so I like to use a controller. And at first I used the Ideomatic version 4 repeater controller, which works very well, but I wanted a little bit more. That's where GMRSlive come in. It's AllStar, it's ham VoIP software. What better controller for a repeater in the world than that? And I started building. But as you can tell, I used a DB9 female on the end. I used that same 6 conductor cable. And you cut out this little piece of rubber next to the power cable, because this pops right out. You can cut out all of it or a piece of it. And then this fits right back into these grooves and holds pressure. So I also took the cable and I fit it down in here, form fitted around these components, put a tie wrap on either side of the exit hole so that it would have stress relief both ways, push and pull. Squirreled this around so that there's not a lot of pressure on this connector. Not a lot of pressure on this connector here. That's what you want. Now, the receive radio all you've got to do is some programming, which we'll get into later, and it's ready to go once the cable's installed. But the transmit radio is a little bit different story. Okay, I don't know how well you can see this, but all around the motherboard of the Icom radio are these little copper pads. Now some of them look like they are connected, and some of them, most of them, are not. But each of them have a letter next to them, and the service manual will explain a lot of times what each one does. But right over here is the one marked letter F, and all you need to do is get a solder blob cleanly and put over that pad. Now they also refer to them in the service manual as peanuts, because each half of the circle kind of looks like a peanut. Doesn't to me, but hey, you go with what they tell you, or what you go with what they refer to. But this little solder blob right here on pad F of the 221 and the 6011, it's always pad F on those two models, allows this radio to pass audio, transmit audio out of this connector. So that's a simple little thing to do, plus the programming, which is not that difficult. You're just going to enable EPTT and then install your cable. Not to damage any components on the board. And then you put your bottom plate back on. When I'm building repeaters, unless it's in a weird environment, I just put 2 screws back in just to hold everything together. Now once both radios are reassembled, you've got your pad F solder blob on pad F and on your transmit radio, and the cables are installed in both. Then you just got to build a cable to connect the accessory cables for each radio to the sound fob board and AllStar node controller. Now I'm going to show you a quick little video here. This is a GMRSlive repeater that I have at my home. It's on my test bench in this video, and you can see the GMRSlive node in the gray box kind of lashed onto the left side. This entire stand is made from Kydex. And those of you that may not be familiar with Kydex, Kydex is a material that's used for many things, but it's like a really thick plastic, for lack of a better term. It's very tough, and it's used to be heated and vacuum molded around a mold for a gun or a knife or a magazine or handcuff case or what have you. Fellow officers that I knew made them for pistol holsters, made them for cuff cases, magazine holsters, and they work very, very well because they're very, very durable. And they come in different colors. So it got me to thinking, you know, because I was wanting to build a rack for these repeaters to keep them on, and I couldn't find any metal that, I mean, I could have found it, but it's really difficult to shape and mold and cut, and it's messy, and I really didn't want something conductive, per se. So it got me to thinking, I'm like, what about Kydex? Now remember, if you heat it, and once it cools, it holds its shape that you've bent it into, and it's really durable. I tried it first with a 0.090 thickness Kydex, and it worked, but it's a little more flexible than I wanted. So I ended up going with a 0.125 thickness Kydex, only because I couldn't find a thicker one on Amazon. But that's all right. It worked perfectly. And I cut it in half. It came in a 2-foot long, 1-foot wide sheet for about $15, not counting tax and all. But it was very reasonable. And when I got it in, I cut it from end to end and made it 6 inches wide. Yes, 6 inches wide. And I had 2 6-inch wide, 2-foot long pieces. And I took about, I took about 6 inches off of each end, measured them evenly, and bent them over a workbench table. Heated it with my heat gun, not a hair dryer, but a heat gun, because you want this thing to get hot, something hot enough to melt solder, technically, close. And try to bend it as evenly as you can, and once the heat's off, to hold it in that position for just a little bit, and I'd say a minute, maybe 2, and it will hold its shape, and it holds it very, very well. This repeater rack is very, very handy because it can also be made semi-portable. Now, granted, attached to that was a small power supply, the GMRS Live node, and what you don't see is a small 50-watt duplexer for the 400 megahertz band, or the GMRS band. And if you'll notice, I also put some ferrite toroid filters. I don't know if that's a toroid, but it's ferrite noise suppression filter I put on here. Not that it needs it, but every little bit helps when you get in these kind of environments, RF environments. I can give you an example here. This is my home GMRS Live node. I've installed Supermon 2, and as you can see, I'm connected to Group 700, the nationwide hosted chat, and I'm also connected via my network phone. And my friend James over in Shawnee, WRPY 436, or his ham call is Alpha Alpha 5 Papa Delta, is connected to me. So I need to log in and disconnect everyone because I want to show you an example of the audio on this Icom repeater that we've built. Okay, and we'll turn on our control here and enable parrot mode and execute it. Now, I may get some interference into the microphone, and I'm going to try to avoid that by backing away. WRUT 923. WRUT 923. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. Now, I even had that a little too close to I even had my mouth a little too close to the mic for that particular one, and it overdrove it at the beginning of that second transmission a little bit. But the audio is very, very good. I've noticed on these Icom radios that the audio is a little bassy. I don't know why, but it sounds good. It's actually pleasant. The audio comes through very nicely. And the first one I put up at my friend Gary's house, Kilo Delta 5 Foxtrot India Papa, his ham call is, his GMRS call is WRWZ 428. I believe that's right. I'm still getting used to these GMRS calls. But the repeater we put up at his house is made out of a pair of these radios on a AllStar GMRSlive node controller. Works very well. We put it on a 6 dB antenna about 30 feet above his garage. He had a microwave antenna pole that was on his garage, and we pulled it down and put a 6 dB antenna on it and put it back up in the air, and it's a brand new feed line, and I can hit it this many miles away in Henrietta on a walkie, but I have to be in a sweet spot to hit it on a walkie. But my mobile up here on the hill will hit it and talk on it. Now, once I get into the downtown of Henrietta, down in the valleys, not so much. But that's why we wanted to use GMRSlive and connect our repeaters. So it's turned into a lot of fun. But these radios were initially used and are still currently used as repeaters for amateur radio. Our 2-meter repeater in Preston, Oklahoma is made from a pair of these. The Sheriff's Office Public Safety repeater in Preston, Oklahoma is made from a pair of these. It's actually a backup repeater now. It used to be our primary, but they've gone on to the state's trunking system since then, doing P25 Phase 1. But that repeater remains in backup and active at all times, and it rocks and it rolls, my friends. These are strong little radios. Now, the VHF version puts out about 50 watts. The UHF version does 40 to 45, and I'd like to turn it down a little bit, especially on 2 meter. We run an amp on it, so we've got the radio turned down to about 5 watts, 5 to 7 watts in, so that we can get about 150 watts out-ish, and it works very well. Works very well indeed. These are great radios, and you know, folks could make them some decent repeaters out of them. I know I am, and I'm having a blast doing it. Now, these radios can be found on eBay, here and there and everywhere at different prices. You just want to be careful. Initially, I bought a few of these models. This is the ICF 420S, and the board on the inside looks almost identical to the 221. It has the same accessory connector. As you can see, the hole's been cut out for the accessory cable. But you have to program these with DOS software, which I actually found and was able to program. It's not easy to do because you've got to use a program called DOSBox to help your computer communicate to a programming cable that's USB. The software thinks it's a serial cable. It's tricky. Not quite as durable. They're not bad, but I've had a lot of issues with a lot of them because they're older. I don't know. Maybe Icom was just developing them. I'm not sure, but I quickly realized I needed to move upwards. But they were cheaper, which is why I went with them at first. So I'm going to do some AllStar nodes with those probably. See how they go. Make, you know, a semi-half duplex situation instead of 2 radios. But these F221s, you can get an 221 is usually VHF. I'm sorry. The F221s are UHF. There's an F121. Those are VHF. The 6011s are UHF. I'm not exactly how to discern the different model numbers to the band, but there's information I'll leave in the comments. And dadgummit, there's so much information out there. Repeaterbuilder.com, good source of information when it comes to Icom radios. And you just, I don't know. If your radio is good, then you've got an excellent way to build either an AllStar node, a GMRSlive node, or a repeater for each one. Take that for what it is, and let's have some fun. The next video, I'll show you the programming software for the 221 and the 3 things. There's about 2 or 3 things in there you really need to remember when you're programming them. So we'll get to that, okay? I'm really glad we've had this adventure together. I know this is not a lot of information, but I wanted to do an introduction video to this radio, or this series of radios that Icom has built. It's a superior brand. Icom's out of Japan, and they've got a proven track record in ham radio and commercial radio and public safety radio. So let's have an adventure of our own. Let's make some repeaters. All right, this is Freddie Mac, your ham radio crusader, wishing you 7 threes. May all the good signals be yours, and ham on, y'all.